Hey, good morning, everybody. Carl Blackstone with the Columbia Chamber. Thrilled to have y'all with us today. We are excited for this issues. We've got the Honorable Molly Spearman with us, the State Superintendent of Education. For many of y'all know Molly. For those that are unfamiliar, will be in the minority. But let me tell you, Molly has served this state for a long time, served in the House of Representatives. Then she had worked for Inez Tenenbaum. Then she ran the Association of School Board Administrators, School Administrators Association, and then got elected as State Superintendent of Education. So what a thrill it is for us to host today. And Molly, we really appreciate you being with us and taking time out of your crazy schedule to join us. So thank you.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And Mark James is on as well. Mark is our chair of the Issues Committee and our Public Policy Committee. So Mark, got you on mute, but there you go. This is your show, so I'm gonna turn it over to you.
Well, good morning. Good morning. I apologize. We'll get into technical difficulties associated with Zoom and broadband and everything else, I'm sure, in the course of our conversation. Again, apologize for some technical difficulties. My name is Mark James. I'm with Cypress Real Estate Partners, commercial real estate firm here in Columbia, also a member of the board of the Chamber of Commerce, as well as the chairman of the Public Policy Committee, which is the host of this this event, this issues forum that we're having today. This is a monthly meeting that we hold the first two.
Uh-oh. I hope that's him and not me.
Hey, Mark, we're losing you a little bit.
Secretary of Education. As Carl said earlier, most of you know Secretary Spearman, her tenure in public service, as well as our Secretary of Education, has been well known, and we're very lucky to have her both in her position and with us today. Molly is a native of Saluda. She has served as both a music teacher, an assistant principal. She has served in the state legislature as both a Democrat and as a Republican, and has been actively involved in the state education department under Inez Tenenbaum, and also through some advocacy organizations through the years prior to her service in election and service as our Secretary of Education. And I have enjoyed from afar getting to know Mrs. Spearman, and know her to be someone who's very calm, very diplomatic, and yet also not afraid to tackle and take on some of the tough issues and a vital part of our community, of our state,
so bad.
this community. So we're very grateful to have her with us today. Our format, Molly, if you don't mind, what we'd like to do is to have you just speak to some of the topical issues that you're encountering as a Secretary of Education. I'm sure the main, probably the top of mind issue is going to be the virus and the schools, and hopefully as we come to some kind of a horizon on this with vaccines coming out, how do we get back to schools and things like that. So hopefully that'll be a starting point. So thank you again for being here.
Thank you, Mark. You all hearing me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Good. Well, good morning, everyone. It's an honor to be with you bright and early on a beautiful Carolina morning. It's so important for education and the Chamber of Commerce to be good friends. And you all know how education is intertwined, is really the foundation of the community. And I like to say all of us owe so much to our teachers, because whether you're the executive director of the Chamber of Commerce, the president of the bank, a neurosurgeon, astronaut, the custodian. You all had teachers, and a teacher helped us get to where we are today. And I always like to think about it's one of the few professions that I bet every one of you could go back and name all of your teachers, grades 1 through 12. I can't name my college professors, but I can certainly tell you all my K-12. Well, not kindergarten for me. I'm old enough that I didn't even have kindergarten, but certainly Miss Mylette Snellgrove, who was my first grade teacher, and all the way through. So thank you for this partnership and for the support that you give education in our community here in Columbia. I could talk all day, got a lot of issues that we could cover, but let me get right to it and tell you an update as to where we are in the state of South Carolina dealing with coronavirus and the models that are of instruction that are in place today. This changes almost daily, certainly weekly. We have 1,267 schools in South Carolina, 1,267. 5 of those are virtual online charter schools. So they are not included in this report since they are always virtual. But as of today, of our 1,267 schools, 773 are back full 5 days a week, 5 days face-to-face operations, normal operations, except the students are wearing masks and they are social distancing. We have 476 schools that are in a hybrid mode of operation and 12 schools that are just virtual. This is changing. We had 2 of our larger districts, York County and Aiken County, start just yesterday, back full 5 days face-to-face. And I know here, I believe Richland 1 is changing has announced their operations to change to more face-to-face in another week or 2. So this changes, and it's not a secret that I have really been pushing this. You can see how it looks there on the map. The only county district that is full remote today is Allendale. They have been back 5 days face-to-face, but we had a few folks, professionals, it was the adults, who did not follow protocol, and had a few folks, a person come to school who thought they just had a head cold, and it turned out to be COVID and infected some staff members, and they are unable to operate. So this is why you have heard me really pushing that teachers need to be prioritized for the vaccine. It's not so much about opening schools, because we know that schools can operate open very safely. The research is so outstanding on this issue. However, once we get back to school, our issue has been quarantining. And as folks are exposed, whether they are positive or not, it has required quarantines. Once you're vaccinated, you don't have to be quarantined anymore. So that would help us tremendously in our operations. Here's why I can say that schools are safe. On September the 4th, we started reporting the number of positive cases among K-12 students and staff. And you can see there the numbers. We're 13,600 as of today, positive cases that have been reported. At the same time, for the entire population, right at 445,000 cases among South Carolinians, which gives us about a 3 percentage points of cases that are among K-12 students and folks who work in the public education system. We are 20% of the state's population, but we're only 3% of the cases. So I think it bears to note there that it's going really well in schools. The research, and we'll go to the next slide, the research has been significant. And Dr. Allison Eckert is the doctor, infectious disease pediatrician down at MUSC. Recently, I saw a headline, researcher is stunned at virus cases in school. And I thought, oh my word, what is it going to be? And it really turned out to be that she was so shocked at just how safe it is in schools. In fact, she says it's so compelling schools are safe. If you put all the mitigation strategies in place, the students' risk is much higher if they're not in school. So yes, you can go back to school and you can read there the other studies in North Carolina and across the country. And the CDC says there's little evidence that schools have contributed meaningfully to increased community transmission. In fact, it's quite the contrary. There's more transmission out in the community. Our children are safer if they are there in school with the mitigation factors in place. We spent a tremendous amount of funding in South Carolina to make sure that that is the case. Here's a rundown on the federal funding, which has been significant. And this includes the funding that came through the CARES Act over the summer and fall, and ESSER, the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund. 194 million came into South Carolina, and majority of that went right out to school districts for them to buy the PPE, protective care, whatever they needed, hire additional teachers. And they have 2 years to spend that funding, by the way. So we're monitoring that here at the department and have a list of how school districts have been drawing that funding down. Some have spent almost all of it, some have not spent as much, kind of watching to see what's going to happen with the state budget and use that funding then as appropriate after we see where the needs are. We also had 84 million through the CARES Act funding, and just recently Congress in December passed the ESSER 2 package, which for South Carolina, again, a significant amount, $846 million going out to school districts for them to use on a vast array of categories. You can read those there. The two that really changed are those last 2 bullets: facility repairs and improvements to reduce the risk of the virus, and improvement of indoor air quality. Previously, all of the funding had been for more programmatic and purchasing of protective equipment, salaries. This funding, though, really does allow school districts to make some repairs, to upgrade their facilities if it is COVID related. So this is very needed, and I'm anxious to see. Right now, school districts are sharing with us how they plan to spend this funding. The amount of money has landed, it's in the bank, and as soon as the districts notify us and we look over to make sure that we're following the guidelines, then they can start drawing down their funds. And then you see the other funding, about 40 million there, that's gone to our private and parochial schools in South Carolina. We are working with them. We just held a webinar last week, and that funding too is available. And as the private schools tell us how they're going to use their funding, they too will be drawing down their assistance there. So very, very excited about how this is working. We'll go to the next slide. Now let's talk a little bit about the vaccine. It's again, I've been pretty vocal on this, that teachers, I really feel strongly that teachers should be prioritized. I had asked for teachers to be moved to 1A. That has not happened, doesn't appear it is going to happen. But the governor does have a press conference that I'll be attending a little later this morning. I won't spill the beans on that. But I'll tell you that school districts are ready. We have been working with them over the last 2-3 weeks to make sure that they are connected with a provider. And particularly now that the Johnson & Johnson vaccine has been approved and the amount of vaccine is growing and increasing in the state, the message to school districts is get ready, providers get ready, because we want those teachers to get shot in their arms just as soon as possible. And so as soon as we get the word that we are eligible, I hope that districts will be on the phone with their providers immediately and say, come on over, we're ready for those shots. So I'm excited about that and look forward to that happening very, very soon. We did survey all teachers in the state. This is kind of interesting because, let's go back to that one, thank you. We do have about 123,000 educators in the state. About 65,000 of those are teachers, the others are support staff. And it was interesting to see when we said, will you take the vaccine? who said they would. It turned out to be about 70,000, 58%. But I'll tell you, in some districts, it's as high as 90, 95%. And in others, it's as low as 15 and 20%. Particularly in the rural area, in the African-American community, there's a lot of hesitation, and historically, we understand why that is true. But I hope that everyone will encourage each other to get the vaccine. It is safe, and it is something that we all need to participate in. So we're working on that, and I think it's going to require leaders in those rural communities to stand up, whether they're the school folks or folks in the faith community, ministers, to stand up and say, let's take the vaccine. We need to do that. So I'm going to be encouraging folks, and I hope you will too. Go to the next slide now. Now, how are the children doing academically? South Carolina is in a very, very unique spot with this information. In fact, you don't get to hear me say we're leading the country, but we really are in the information that we have. And here's why. When our legislature passed the continuing resolution back in July and August, they added a part to it to say that students would have to be assessed when they return to school in August or September, and they would have to be assessed again in December. And schools were already doing that with their interim, or sometimes called formative assessments. If you have children or grandchildren in school, you may know it as the MAP test or the STAR test or iReady test. Districts, there are 4 or 5 different assessments that are nationally produced and normed to our standards that schools give every year in order to help students along the way. And this is immediate information. Teachers get the data back that day or the next day, and they're already using this data to give interventions. There are students being pulled out for extra work. The chart on the right there shows you a little bit of what we know. There was significant learning loss. It was especially pronounced in the 4th and 5th grade students in ELA, English Language and Arts, and in math, and 4th and 8th grade students in math. The way this chart is broken down, it's kind of interesting because the full sample at this point, now we have more information loaded into this data now. This was done a few weeks ago. There were 28 districts with 125,000 students participating. The next column are those students who were back 5 days a week in school. And of those, there were 23 districts at that time who were back in school. 50 is the number that is good. That means they're kind of where we want them to be. If they're above 50, that's really good. Below 50, we kind of expected due to learning loss. So there's not a lot of green on this chart. In fact, the only green, and I want you to notice this, it's kind of interesting. The third column are those students who were remote and took the test at home remotely. So look at those kindergarten students who were home in 19 districts and took their first assessment on the computer at home. They scored 88, way above average, meaning they were really, really smart, really, really well prepared. However, when you go to the next column, you see when they came back to school, they dropped in December about 20 points. So the last column are those who were remote, virtually, and then they came back to school and took the assessment in December. So one thing we've learned is you got to be very, very careful about the validity of students testing at home. Sometimes they may have a little extra help on those virtual assessments. It's much more accurate, we believe, if they are in school with their teacher there with them. So you can see where the growth needs to be. And my computer, let's see here if I can pull this over just a little bit, but the last chart there shows you how the students have grown in their learning from August to December. So we know we've got work to do. If they're showing below, as I said, 50 points, that means we really need to work. And that we're working now with districts on the interventions that they can do. They can use this funding. We want to be sure that they know what the best practices are. And if we'll go to the next slide. Well, I guess not the next slide. Let me talk just a little bit more about that. But what we're hearing right now is a lot of our districts have hired retired teachers to work, pulling the students out, working one-on-one, and that seems to be the most effective use of the funding now, to work with them. Students are gaining. The December assessment showed some of our students are already brought back up to where they need to be. Others need some significant interventions. And we are currently working with a group called Education Analytics. They take all of this data, crunch it out for us, and they're tiering the children. So we'll be able to hand to a principal at a school, teacher in a classroom, the list of students who need significant intervention, moderate, and those who are on grade level or where they should be as they assess. Other things that will probably be done, after school programs. Some districts are talking about expanded summer school programs. So we'll be working with them, giving them information on best practices, and be announcing those different interventions as we go through the spring. The other things that we're working on in the legislature this year, always the safety and wellness of our students. We have asked for additional funding for some school nurses. We have 73 schools in the state that do not have a school nurse. Continued working on the resource officers. One of the big issues always recruiting and retaining teachers. What kind of changes do we need to make to the requirements? Are they fair? Do we need to give more incentive money? Absolutely. Raising the salary. You know that our teachers did not get their 2% step increase that they get every year that's promised to them. That was held, but the legislature has already voted, and that will be happening where they'll get that retroactively step increase. So that's really a good thing. I also asked for an additional salary increase. It's been very disappointing because a year ago we had such a huge surplus that teachers were looking to get somewhere around 6 to 10% salary increase this year. And of course that went away. So we're working very closely with the legislature, and I know that they'll do the best they can on our salaries. Expanding our college and career options so that our students can be ready for the workforce. Governor McMaster has worked with us. He too is very interested in expanding early learning. We will be adding additional 4-year-old classes across the state with additional funding that we anticipate will be coming this year. And then finally, one of the focuses that I have worked on since I have been in office, and I'm in my 6th year now, and we've seen tremendous improvement, is in district efficiency. When I took office, the Abbeville plaintiff case had just been ruled on, and it really caught my eye when the justices said, rural districts, you need to do your part. You know, this is about working together. So I started looking at all of our districts, and we had at the time 82 districts. We're down to 79 districts now, traditional districts, but we had 10 districts in the state that had less than 1,500 students in the entire district. And I know we sit here in Richland 1, and I've joked with Dr. Witherspoon, he has schools bigger than that. 1,500 students in the entire district. In fact, our smallest district only had 597 students in it. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that with the funding that's available, the fewer students you have, the larger percentage of your budget is going to go into administration. And most of these districts are very poor. So it's a real challenge. No matter if you had a genius as your finance officer and a budget, it's very, very difficult to make ends meet when you're that small. So we started pushing shared services, which many of the districts have started doing, working together to see if there are positions and projects that they can share, but really with the ultimate goal of consolidation, so that every district in South Carolina would have at least 1,501 students. So I never thought I'd live to see it, but we actually have 8 districts now that are in the process of consolidating. It is official for Hampton 1 and 2. That's Estill and Hampton. They will be consolidated come July 1st of 21 in just a few months. Clarendon 1, that's Somerton, and Clarendon 3, Turbyville, are consolidating, and that has already happened. They have a district called Clarendon 4, and will go into full effect in on July 1 of this year. And then there are others, Bamberg 1 and 2, that are under discussion, and also in Barnwell County, Williston and Blackville, those 2 districts, and possibly even Barnwell 45, which is the larger city of Barnwell, but discussions are going on there. So it would be a tremendous step forward for South Carolina. Those lines were drawn way back in the 1960s during desegregation, and something that we really need to move past. And so that within those generally small rural counties, people are working together, not competing with each other for teachers, for administrators, for dollars, and really give a better quality, higher quality program and opportunities for all the students in those counties. So I'm happy about that, and I'll be quiet now and answer questions.
No, I'll tell you what, I wanted to ask you a question about that topic specifically. When you say there are conversations taking place about consolidation, tell me, is that a voluntary process? What is how does that go through?
Well, there are different ways. I would say it's voluntary with a lot of nudging from me, to the point of almost, I hate to say embarrassing folks, but saying, you know, y'all need to sit down and talk to each other. You got, you know, 2 districts, for instance, even Williston and Barnwell. When we put them together, they're still going to be under 1,500 students. That's how small they are. And knowing how difficult it is to find teachers, you know, y'all got to work together. You're within one county, you got to work together. So the final thing that really brought people to the table, though, 2 years ago, the legislature put about $50 million on the line for me to work with these districts and encourage them that if they would consolidate and come up with a consolidation plan, that the state would help them. There are costs. You have different software programs. You have to equalize teacher salaries between the 2 areas. So, and some of them are just so poor, they didn't have the money to even think about that. So the legislature put money on the table. It brought folks to the table, and also we're able to give them some funding for facility needs. And I would say, like for Hampton County, they're getting $10 million to help build a new school there at some point. In addition to another about $3 million that they got to help with software. So about $13 million, which to a large district doesn't sound like much, but that's like manna from heaven for a rural district. So it took putting some dollars. So yes, it's voluntary, but with a lot of pushing and shoving from me and from the legislature.
And the focus on that has really been on the smaller.
It has been. And I started there because, Mark, when I looked at the districts that we are generally, that we have to go help, every few years they're broke and we have to go in and give them funding, or they're having difficulty staffing a school or keeping up with meeting special education requirements or whatever. When I looked at all the places that we've had to really go into work, it generally started around the 1,500 population. Now that's not always true because we had a few that were very well run. They were very lean, but the amount of work that sometimes we have had superintendents who are the superintendent, the personnel director, and maybe part-time helping out with the financial director.
Right.
You know, it's just not a good way to run a business. So it has been voluntary. I meet with the local delegation, and those that I mentioned, local legislation has been introduced by the House and Senate members there to make it happen. Now, I am announcing, and it's no secret, but I will be announcing a consolidation down in Florence 4. We are currently managing 3 districts, Florence 4, which is Timmonsville, Williamsburg County, and Allendale County. Williamsburg and Allendale are full county schools. There's no additional consolidation that should happen there. But in Timmonsville, they have 660 students in the entire district, 160 kids in the high school. They're 7 miles from Florence 1, which has about 16,000 students, and their high schools are 1,500 to 1,600. Florence 4 is broke, and we've been down there working, trying to manage, get them in a place, and that was just one of their problems. But I have already announced to the community, and they'll be notified this week. It will happen next year, but a consolidation there for Florence 4 into Florence 1. So I do have the authority to do that in some cases where a district is in emergency management, but otherwise it's done by the local legislators.
I guess I'm kind of honing in a little bit on this because it relates to some conversations we've been having in Columbia on some of the same topic. Is the main objection that you see towards consolidation coming from administrators, from school elected officials on the school board?
Generally it's that. My experience so far, it has been, and of course now these are very small districts where generally speaking the students are not performing well. There are a lot of issues. When I go and share that information with the community has been very receptive to let whatever it takes to help us get in a better shape. There has not been strong opposition to the consolidation of the district administration. A little, but from school board members, from some school board, and even not all school board members. But there is, there's concern from the elected school board officials for the consolidation. Now, I tell you, it goes to a different level when you start talking about closing a school. That's when it really starts hitting the emotions and the heart. People don't seem to be as tied. They get it. They understand that a joined administration is going to yield more efficiency and hopefully a better run school district.
Just switching gears, we've got a couple of questions that have come up relating to teachers and to teacher shortages. Has that been amplified by the virus, folks who are getting out of teaching? And then as a segue into the conversation for a lot of our folks, teachers who didn't necessarily come through the education system with teaching degrees, so to speak, but have been in business and are looking to give back, maybe, what's the pathway for that to happen?
Well, I'll take that one first. We've made significant improvements in the ability for folks who did not go through a traditional teacher education program to get into teaching. There's several alternative programs that have been approved. One that's been around for a while is called PACE. That's for anyone who wants to become a teacher. The district will hire you. You've got a degree in business or mathematics or biology, but you didn't get the education part of it. Where you can, if you get a job, the district will hire you. Then in a 2-year process, the Department of Education actually runs your certification program, and you come to school for a week or two, a weekend or two, and you can be fully certified. We certify as many teachers through PACE as our colleges and universities do in South Carolina, and that's really yielded some great teachers. There are a couple others where you take a test. You've got a 4-year degree, and you take a test, and you can become certified through their alternative program. Teachers for Tomorrow is one. There's one called ABCTE Teachers. So, so there are ways. There's also a provision for anyone, say, like you or Carl there, as bright business folks who are just dying to have something else to do. You can teach a course, 1 or 2 courses. You can't teach full time, but you could teach 1 or 2 courses as an adjunct teacher and not have to take any kind of examination, just be able to do that based on your work experience. There is legislation, though, that's coming up this week that significantly opens this up. In fact, the bill says that a school can have up to 25% of its teachers who are not traditionally certified, who would be able to show by their work experience and their competence in an area, whether it's mathematics, science, whatever that they might be, that a district could hire them. And so that's being debated. I support that. I think it might need to be a pilot for us to try it for a couple of years to make sure it's working well. But there's a lot of discussion about opening it up, and I believe it would help us. The other thing I think is really important, that we've got to identify people in our rural areas to be teachers there. Because there's just not a lot of people like me who are going to go live in Saluda where we don't even have a Walmart, you know, but I like that. Not too many people like me. I have to drive about 25 miles over to Newberry to go to Walmart, and that's fine. But we need to really work on attracting young people and folks in those rural areas who will live there to be teachers and help them get certified. One thing we're doing right now, there are a lot of teacher aides, young women, men who didn't have a chance to go to college, but you can see it. They're working in the schools as teacher aides, and with just a little help and financial help, they could get their 4-year degree probably online. I'm pushing the Palmetto College through the University of South Carolina. It's a great way to get your degree. So we've got some work to do there, but we're on it, trying to offer as many opportunities as we can.
Great. Well, thank you for those comments. And one question I wanted to also ask before Carl may have some additional questions that are coming in through the chat room, but tell me what your thoughts are on the elected versus appointed Secretary of Education.
Okay. You know, 2 years ago, in 2018, I worked really hard with the legislature, and it was a difficult fight to get it passed, even just to say that the referendum question would be on the ballot. But we did. We got it passed in the House and Senate. Mark, I spent my own, nobody else was willing to put a whole lot of money into it. I spent my own campaign funding. Luckily, I was unopposed in 2018. And so I had some funds, and I spent to advertise a little bit, travel around the state to push it, kind of lonesome. I was very lonesome out there doing it. I guess I didn't do a very good job because the people resoundingly defeated it, and almost 70%, which is a landslide, to say, no, we want to vote for this. As for me, I heard them loud and clear, and I'm not pushing it again. Not this soon. Now, there is an effort in the speaker, and the House is already taking up a measure, and I would assume probably the Senate's going to do the same thing. Honestly, I can argue it either way. For me, it was mostly the fact that it cost a lot of money to run a statewide campaign, and there are very few educators who will put their toes into that water. I'm kind of an unusual person in that I had politics in my blood, and I was an educator. But people just aren't going to sacrifice what it takes to run a statewide campaign for this office that, by the way, pays $92,000 a year, less than an elementary school principal. The salary has not been increased since back in the, I guess, 1990s, when Inez was state superintendent. So you have to have a real public servant heart to serve, and you got to spend you got to spend $3,000 just to file and then go run a campaign. So it's tough to get qualified people to do it. And by the way, there are no qualifications. You just have to be a registered voter in South Carolina. So I think you should be guaranteed a more qualified person if it were appointed. But I will tell you, nationally, the longevity of appointed superintendents in the country, there's 13 of us that are elected. And the others, the longevity is about 1.5 years. I'm one of the longest serving state soups in the nation now. There are 2 or 3 of us that are in our second terms of those who have been elected. But the problem with the appointment is once you have a disagreement, you're out. So I have a feeling, had I been appointed, I may not be serving right now, you know? So I can argue it. I can argue this one both ways. But as for me, I heard the people loud and clear, and I'm not spending any of my campaign funds on it again, or my energy. But you know, I get it. I get it.
Good, Carl. What have we got? Questions?
Yeah, I got a couple questions, Molly. And by the way, we're glad you're still there. Glenna Barlow has a question. Can you speak to what next school year might look like, particularly with respect to extracurricular activities, performing arts, field trips? I mean, we all don't have a crystal ball, but do you think how's your feeling like things will be somewhat back to normal next year?
Well, I certainly hope so. You know, we it is a crystal ball we're looking into, but I think if we continue to get our teachers vaccinated and then in the summer move into where possibly our students, particularly our older students, high school students, can be vaccinated, because that's where the younger children has been less spread for sure. More spread in the older children, and it's been more teacher to teacher than so much student to teacher. It's been more of the teachers not doing something and coming to school infected and then spreading it. But I certainly hope we can be somewhat normal. You know, most sports, extracurricular activities, while I did not agree, and I was public on this, I was, the high school league allowed for sports to be played. It was an individual district choice. And I strongly felt that if you were not back in face to face, then you should not be participating in sports. But obviously not everyone agreed with that, and I had no authority over that. But I hope, and I enjoyed sports. In fact, I'll get a little plug in. My Saluda Tigers girls basketball team, they're playing for the state championship tomorrow over in Aiken, the first time since 1953. The year before I was born. So you know where I'm going to be tomorrow at 12 o'clock. I'm going to be cheering the Saluda Tigers. So I love it as much as anyone, and it's very important for our students. You know, we haven't even talked about that. I talked a little bit about the academic loss, but the social emotional strain that everyone has been through. But can you imagine being a high school senior or junior over the last year and what all you've missed out on?
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be, hopefully it will be close to normal. I will tell you this, I know our educators are going to do everything they possibly can to make it as normal as possible. We have bought all the stuff, the masks, the plexiglass, the disinfectant, and, you know, getting better at it all the time. So I hope with all those protocols available, we'll be able to run a more normal year.
Great. As a parent, I know Mark's got one that's a freshman in college. I have a freshman and I have a senior in, you know, it's just tough. And, you know, we're all living through it, but it is tough.
Sad. It's sad.
So,
And our children, you know, we are putting a lot of our attention on the social emotional welfare and the mental health of our students and of our staff. So we're encouraging districts to use some of those resources that they have. We certainly are going to be here at the department. We're going to be using some of our funding to hire some additional health nurse type folks and mental health assistants to really make sure that our folks, our students and staff have the resources they need.
great. Couple more questions. Do charter schools receive access to that federal funding? This came on after your chart.
Yes.
Yes, they are part. If they're all public charter schools, which would
not
all of them.
Yes.
But
Yes. You know, I'd have to double check that. I know that they've gotten some funding. I'm not sure. Of course, it went out, allocated out to the districts. Let me text one of my folks and just make sure I'm answering that correctly. Derek, I think you're listening in on the call. If you would text John Payne and just ask him that the allocation that went out to charter schools, and let me know so I can let these folks know.
all right, Katie, we'll follow back up with you with that answer once we get that. Joe Bernard of Providence has a question. Turnover. Have you seen a rise in teachers leaving the profession because of COVID and the state experience over the last year? 2, regarding K-12 education, where does South Carolina currently rank nationally? And then he follows up, thanks to your leadership and your work.
Thank you. Several good questions there. First of all, I don't think, to be honest with you, yes, we have seen some teachers leave. We have seen some teachers who were near retirement just say, I'm not going to put up with this anymore. I don't want to deal with it. Bye. It has not been quite as much of that as I had thought it would be, to be very honest with you. And I can send you official numbers, Carl, if folks are interested in that. You know, teachers are tired. They are tired. But, you know, I try to encourage them that, look, everybody is. And, you know, as teachers and as educators, as a state employee, I'm thankful I still gotten a paycheck.
Right.
And as educators, we got to be reminded that, look, we still got a job. And Derek is answering that question there, I think.
Yep, got it.
Okay, good. Yes, they are. Is that, yeah.
Yes.
They are. Because we got students that we teach that the parents have lost their jobs. You talk about stress and lose your health insurance, and that's stress. But we are tired. Everyone's tired. And I think that there could be some who just are tired and who don't come back. But I hope that with the support, many districts have tried to give some financial bonuses to their teachers to give them a little extra pat on the back and encouragement. And I think you as business folks, as you see your teachers and thank teachers and just say a word of encouragement helps us through this. So, but it has, yes, we have lost some folks, but it has not been as significant as I thought it would be here in South Carolina.
On that same
And then
note,
he asked a second question.
oh yeah, he did. Sorry. Regarding K-12 education, where does South Carolina?
Where do we rank? Yeah. We are not last, as folks like to portray us. They're just oodles of polls and rankings it's very frustrating because sometimes I know there was one a year or so ago that showed us last, and it turned out it was based on really some higher education. It wasn't K-12. Generally speaking, on test scores, we're not in the upper half. We rank somewhere around 38, 39. And there's some places, yeah, we are down at 49th on ACT scores, but again, we're also one of the highest when you look at poverty.
Mm-hmm.
And quite honestly, I'll tell you, as far as ranking schools within our state of South Carolina, it's been so apparent, and it's almost an aha moment, but it shouldn't be. I've met with MUSC and different folks who come to talk to me about health issues or mental health issues or whatever the problem might be, and they put down their map to show, here's where the problem areas are. And I go, aha, that's the same area for the schools that are struggling. It really is about poverty. It really is about poverty and not having the resources to meet the needs of the whole child. You can't teach a child who's hungry. You can't teach a child who's sick, but yet public schools do that every day. So we feed them and we help get them to the doctor. So, again, and our historical data here in South Carolina, someone said something, we're the most, and it's true, we're one of the least educated states in the nation. The most educated is Massachusetts, where over half of their population now has master's degrees. Half of our population, we had a third of mothers who don't have a high school degree, but yet we expect that our children are going to perform at the same level as those families, and I know sometimes I come across defensive on it, but I just, I want to say a hats off to our school folks, because they take their schools where there are kindergarten classes where not a single child in the class shows up to pass the readiness test. And then there are others that have all the children come in passing the readiness exam. But yet we expect those two schools to perform and get those children at the same level within 3 years. Everybody reading on grade level. So we're still trying, and that's our goal. But I just say that for people to be reminded of the extreme challenge that we have.
Molly, I tell you, what you're touching on is the intersection of business, poverty, and education. And that is the critical role of education, feeds over into chambers of commerce, collections of business folks who are looking and saying, we need a workforce that's coming out that's able to do the jobs we're asking them to do. And it can either be a cycle down or a cycle up. And that's why the chamber, our chamber, has made such a huge deal about education and working with the community school districts and everything.
Well, I know they appreciate your, I know Richland, both districts here appreciate your support and they need your support. And again, it is, sometimes folks forget what the challenge really is. You know, and I'll just share with you, we've learned so much. We have come a long way through this pandemic. It's been tough, but there are improvements that we will have made because of the pandemic. One of those is in broadband access. I didn't touch on that, but what a glaring problem it came to be on March 13th, a year ago, when overnight from Sunday afternoon about 4 o'clock till Monday morning, school districts had to flip on a dime and turn in to be all virtual. And there were districts who did it magnificently. They were ready to go. In fact, they had already been practicing. And then there are others who didn't have devices for all their kids. And it didn't matter because there was no access in the community anyway. And we have over 100,000 hotspots now. From March last year, we've purchased over 100,000 hotspots that the department, we are paying the rent on those for our poorest families in South Carolina. And that's going to continue. And finally, the provider companies all came to the table and said, let's quit competing and let's figure out who's going to do what to make this better in the state. So we've come a long way. We're still not there, but tremendous progress has been made with broadband access, which also helps education, but it helps telehealth, telemental health. And, you know, I'll give a hats off to the Department of Mental Health, leader in the country on providing mental health services. We did 100,000 sit-down cases with a student sitting in front of a computer with a psychiatrist. And that's because of the great work of John McGill, the former director at the Department of Mental Health. We've been doing that now for 2 or 3 years. So having broadband access, and I know the chamber supports this, but those communities without it are left behind. They are totally left behind. And we have got to change that, and that has improved, but we've got to take it steps further. So, you know, that's some lemonade, I think, that's come out of the pandemic.
Hey, Mark, can I interject? We've got I'm conscious of time, but a couple quick questions, Molly. These should be easy. There were some districts throughout the state have lost some students because of the pandemic, and many private schools have seen a surge. Is that a concern going forward? Yes. And what is the consequences of the funding for those districts? Do they lose dollars because of people?
Yes, and I am concerned about that. And that's one reason I was really pushing our districts to get back face-to-face to offer families an option. My own grandchild, who's 4, Molly Brooke, they live up in Mecklenburg, and she was starting preschool at her little community school, but it went virtual. And Katie and those tried it with Molly Brooke until they went in one day and she's not sitting in her chair, she's under the table while the virtual lesson. She was bored so she became a public school dropout and had to go to a little private preschool where they were offering face-to-face. So yes, I am concerned about it. We did lose a number of students to private and parochial schools, and a number changed to the public charter. Now, when they moved to the public charter schools, that is a transfer because those are actually schools and districts. So a traditional district loses the funding. If the student leaves, the funding goes with them if they go to the public charter. And if they go, of course, to the private school now, there's no transfer of funding, but that goes back into the pot to be split up for other folks to use. So it is a funding issue. I hope that families are happy. I want families to be happy. I want students to be happy and thriving. And if they have done well after those transfers, I imagine they're going to stay there. If they're not, maybe they'll come back. I hope they will. We want every family to have a great public school option, and encourage them to participate. We need families, all types of families. We need, we serve everyone, and we certainly want our affluent families who have that option of paying private school tuition. We need those families and that leadership in our public school districts as well. So it made me sad, but I understand when your children are at home and they're so missing out on being face to face. And so, I certainly understand families for making that decision, but it made me sad. And I hope we can reverse that.
Great. And I think we got time for one more. Marvin Robinson has a quick question. What's the status of requiring graduate or high school kids to take a personal finance course in order to graduate? I know Jerry Govan pushed that for a long time. I know there's another bill out right now, but just the status, I think it was up last week.
Yeah, the bill currently, high school students they're required to take an economics course. And what we have done over the last few years, because personal finance issues are so lacking, and we saw the need for that we added personal finance standards, required standards, to the economics course. So the discussion has been to sort of flip that, to enhance the personal finance and make it the predominant part of that course. So there is legislation going through. I don't know the exact status of that. I think they've held a committee hearing on it. It may be moving toward the floor, but we support that. I've just seen it. Education has to evolve. Economics is important. Yes, absolutely. There are things that folks need to know about how the economy works. But I would think now that, really life skills as far as personal finance, I'd probably put that a little ahead of the real need. So I support the legislation, and it would flip the predominance of the personal finance standards would become larger, and the economics would be a smaller part of subset of what would be taught and required for every high school graduate.
Okay. That's all the questions we got. Mark, I'll let you close, and I'll forgo my time because of Molly's had so many questions for her. So thanks, Molly. Mark.
Great. Thank you so much for your time. You've been very generous in your candid comments on a lot of topics. I think we all are aware of the role of education in our community and the importance of your job. And thank you for serving, not only for your time this morning, but for your time every day, all day. And we're grateful for that. And the priorities that you've created, I think, are consistent with what we all look for in a good, strong public servant. So thank you for that. I do want to remind everybody that these issues forums are on the first Tuesday of every month. And so look forward to hopefully seeing you in April, early April. And also would like to thank our sponsors today of this Bank of America and Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina. And thank each of you, our partners, for your participation in the chamber and support of the chamber. If you ever have a need or a question or anything that we can do for you, please don't hesitate to reach out to Carl or Susan McPherson or Henry Baskins or myself. We're all willing to do what we can to help you out any way possible. And with that, we will bring this meeting to a close. Thank you very much.
Thank y'all.